It was 4:47 a.m. when the phone rang, right as my old coffee pot sputtered its first dark bubble. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in my little house on Sycamore Drive, listening to the wind nudge the porch swing like a friend who'd forgotten how to knock. At 66, you stop fighting sleep. You make peace with scraps of it. But that call cut the quiet clean in half. "Grandma," my granddaughter whispered, "whatever you do, don't open the door for anyone today. Don't sign anything. Keep the chain on. Promise me." I laughed a little, because what else do you do at 5 in the morning? But she wasn't laughing. Through the line, I could hear a train far away. She sounded like she was hiding under concrete. "I can't explain yet. You'll understand soon. Please, promise." Then the line went dead. I sat there with the receiver still warm in my hand, watching the porch light flicker in the wind. Everything in that house felt suddenly fragile. The chain on the door, the quiet, the trust. And by noon, I would understand exactly what she meant, because a bright orange notice would be taped to my front door. A realtor's lockbox would hang from my knob, and the strangers claiming to protect me would already be moving to take everything I owned. I know the time because I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in my little ranch house on Sycamore Drive, listening to the furnace settle and the wind nudge the porch swing like an old friend who never learned to knock. At 66, sleep doesn't come in one long ribbon anymore. It falls in scraps. You make peace with it, or you spend the nights angry at the dark, and I've got better things to be than angry. "Grandma," my granddaughter whispered when I picked up, "whatever you do, don't open the door for anyone today. Don't sign anything. Keep the chain on. Promise me." "Lila, baby, you scaring me." "Why?" Through the line, I caught a faraway sound, thin and hollow, as if she was standing under the overpass by the river. A train horn moaned and a metal clatter followed like cars coupling. She pressed her words like she was biting them to make them smaller. "I can't explain yet. You'll understand soon. Please, promise." "I promise," I said, because I always have. The line clicked dead before I could say, "I love you." The house breathed. The porch light flickered in the wind and steadied. I stared at my front door longer than a grown woman should stare at a rectangle of wood. The chain was on. The key I keep for emergencies slept in its usual place under a fat ceramic goose beside the steps. The same goose my husband won at the county fair in '89 by knocking over milk bottles like he was born for it. People think you become forgetful with age. I think you become careful. You learn the rhythm of your own house. One loose board in the hallway, one stubborn drawer in the laundry room, 3 minutes before the coffee runs bitter. You learn what goes where, including trust. I poured coffee and took it to the sink window. The maples on the curb shook off the last of February. A dog barked down the block, the same old beagle who hadn't remembered his name since 2012. Routine steadied my hands. At 8, I took my small pill box and made my list out loud. Walgreens for the blood pressure refill, 2 stamps at the post office, biscuits at Dots if the griddle is hot, and then home. On Wednesdays, I pay bills at the table by the window. Routine can be a kind of prayer when the world is busy tying knots in your shoelaces. By 9, I was on the road in my Buick LeSabre, the one my husband used to call a living room with a motor. The heater worked if I hit the dash just once with the heel of my hand. At Dot's Diner, the waitress poured coffee as if it were a blessing and slid me a cinnamon biscuit without being asked. At the post office, I bought a whole book of stamps to show off, then asked for 2 more anyway because small rebellions are good for the spine. When I turned the Buick back onto Sycamore Drive with my Walgreens bag rustling on the passenger seat, I braked, so my coffee kissed the lid. My porch had been dressed like it was going to a party I didn't plan. An orange notice, square and ugly, was taped to my glass. A fresh realtor's lockbox, clean as a tooth, hung from my knob. Half tipped in the grass by the walkway, like someone had tried to stand it and thought better of it, leaned a white signboard with a navy star, Pine and Star Realty. I left the engine running and stepped out into the kind of wind that feels like a polite slap. My name was on the notice, Dorothy A. Miller. Beneath it, a docket number, PR 23147. The words ran together until I grabbed them by the collar one by one. Notice of entry and inventory by court-appointed temporary guardian, securing assets pending evaluation and placement. Contact Wellspring Guardians, LLC. Attorney of record, Dean Porter. The chain on the door looked suddenly thin, like you'd put on a diary, not a life. My hand went straight to my phone. I dialed 911 to make a record, and right after I called Sheriff Clay Browder on his cell because there are times you want the person who knows your pie recipes and not just your zip code. He rolled up 15 minutes later in a county Tahoe with Detective Karen Yates riding shotgun. Clay walked like a man who grew up running in cleats on clay fields and never quite took the field out of his feet. Karen had a notebook that looked like it might start writing by itself if she forgot it in the kitchen. "Miss Dorothy," Clay said, careful and steady, lifting the paper off the glass without ripping the tape. "Morning. Let's see what this is."
He read quietly, mouth going tight. Karen scanned it, then tilted it toward the light to read the fine print, like it could be argued into saying something kinder. "Says there's an ex parte emergency guardianship filed this morning," Clay said. "Petition claims you're at risk. Stove incidents, confusion, wandering, financial exploitation. Physician affidavit attached. They've got an order authorizing entry to secure assets and arrange for evaluation." I burned a pan of cornbread last week because I took a phone call from Pastor Jean. My neighbor saw me walk to the mailbox in my house shoes. As for my money, the only one exploiting me is the electric company every July. Who filed it? Karen pointed. "Wellspring Guardians. Porter is the lawyer. Dr. Meade signed the affidavit." "I don't even know a Dr. Meade," I said. "My doctor is Dr. Patel over on Willow Loop, and she can recite my cholesterol like the pledge." "We're going to verify the docket," Clay said. "In the meantime, nobody sets foot in your house without my say-so. Keep that chain on like Leela told you." "How'd you—" "Leela called me too," he said. "She sounded scared, Dorothy." "Did she say where she was? I heard a train." Before he could answer, a black Lincoln slid to the curb and sat there like it had an opinion it was going to share no matter who asked. My daughter Marissa stepped out first, smoothing her coat with hands that were already apologizing. Behind her came a man who smelled faintly of something that cost more money than I spend on Christmas. "Mom," Marissa said, voice pitched bright, the way you talk to dogs and judges. "This is Mr. Porter. He's helped some clients at my firm. He says this is a misunderstanding and that guardianship is a short-term tool to keep you safe while we adjust. My meds are in order. My checkbook balances. And a short-term tool still cracks a skull if you use it wrong." Dean Porter smiled with his eyes, not his mouth. The mouth was for talking, and the eyes were for measuring. "Mrs. Miller," he said smoothly, "an emergency guardianship is protective. It ensures that if there is confusion, and the affidavit indicates—" "What's your fee?" I asked. "Fees are standard and court approved." "That wasn't the question," I said, and he didn't answer it. "Pine and Star will inventory and secure valuables to prevent loss. It's a routine process. The court just wants to make sure you're safe." "The court wants the truth," Clay said mildly, stepping between us as if he had nothing better to do, which is exactly when he is most serious. "Porter, you know how this works." He did, and he didn't like being reminded. Marissa tucked her coat tight as if the wind had teeth. "Mom, just cooperate, please. It's what people do when they care." Care. I have learned the hard way that care is a word people like to borrow, and it never means the same thing when they ask you to sign something. You can put a ribbon on a trap and call it a crutch. It still wants your ankle. They left. Porter to his Lincoln, Marissa to wherever she had to go to clean the guilt off her hands. Clay called the courthouse. Karen called Dr. Patel. I sat on the second step and looked at the ceramic goose guarding my key like an idiot with a porcelain hat. "Dorothy," Clay said, holding out his phone so I could see the docket on the screen. "Filed at 8:13. Judge's stamp, Dr. Mead's affidavit. It's clean on paper. Fast has a cost, Karen said quietly. Who paid it? I didn't, and not in any currency I'm willing to spend. Clay nodded toward the street. A white Crown Vic idled across from my house, windows up, driver wearing sunglasses under a February sky. He did not pretend to read a map or look at his phone like a bored teenager. He looked at my house like a warehouse. Deputy Noakes, Clay said under his breath. Newish. I'll have a word. You ever notice how wolves learn to sit like dogs if you keep their bowls full? I'm learning, Clay said, and went to do his job. Karen took my arm and walked me inside. You got a landline? Put it by the door. Turn the porch light off during the day so you can see who's out there. If anyone knocks, you call me or 911. Don't be polite. Polite is for potlucks. Polite is my default. Make stubborn your default today. It suits you. I made coffee because nobody should have to hear what came next without warmth. Dr. Patel called back herself. Dorothy, I did not sign anything. I have never had a concern about your capacity. If a Dr. Mead wrote something, I'm going to find out who he is.
Karen went to the courthouse. Clay told Deputy Noakes to take his sunglasses off if he wanted to keep his job. I stood at my sink and put my glasses on properly and watched my street. A white van with a magnet sign, Safety Net Wellness, came down the block at noon and slowed. When it saw Clay's Tahoe and my jaw, it kept rolling. At 1:30, the doorbell rang anyway. I left the chain on. 2 women in gray scrubs stood on my porch with clipboards and smiles that never made it to their eyes. Mrs. Miller, the shorter one chirped, we're here to complete a free wellness check sponsored by your HOA and church partners. Just a quick cognitive screen and blood pressure check. We need a consent form signed if transport is indicated. You're not from my church, I said, and I don't have an HOA. The tall one's smile thinned. She slid a form against the glass with a practiced move. My name was already printed at the top. The boxes for transport if indicated and contact attorney of record were checked. You can do the memory words with me, I said dryly. No, no, and absolutely not. Mrs. Miller, resisting doesn't help anyone, the short one said, turning the pleasant up high enough to buzz. We're trying to keep you safe. It's routine. It's routine to ask a stranger to consent to lose her life at the door, I asked. I don't sign things when my shoes are still on. The tall one glanced over her shoulder. Down the block, the ambulance that had been idling earlier rolled slow like a dog pretending not to be interested in the roast on the counter. I'm calling 911, I said, and I did, out loud on speaker so the whole idea had witnesses. This is Dorothy Miller at 212 Sycamore Drive. I have 2 individuals attempting to coerce me to sign medical and transport forms. I am not in distress. I do not consent to evaluation or transport. Please log this. The operator said, we have a unit nearby, and the scrubs decided they had better porches to visit. As they left, the short one slapped a red sticker on my mailbox. Attempted visit number 1. Bless your heart, I said to the sticker, because sarcasm is cheaper than therapy. Clay came back with Detective Yates, and Karen's notebook looked full. Dr. Mead runs a clinic out by the bypass. He signs a lot of things quickly. The judge says he'll see you tomorrow morning first thing for a review. We're going to kill this petition before it grows legs. Thank you, I said, because gratitude should be said out loud and not just felt. Also, Clay added, an unknown number texted me, tell her midnight, behind Neptune's skate, come alone, pecan pie. Not exactly subtle. Lila, I said, because I could hear the way those words were stitched. She talks like me when she's scared.
We'll be close, but if she's set alone, we'll let you go to the door first. You call me when you're on your way. I made a chicken and rice casserole because fear eats better with starch. I called Pastor Jean and told her I'd miss choir. I put on my thickest socks and watched the day run out of light. Around 6, my daughter Marissa came back. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she had 2 coffees in one hand like a peace offering and a question. Mom, I didn't know. He said this was protective. He said people who love their parents do this. He said you'd be safe and I'd sleep. He didn't say anything about lockboxes and vans. People who love their parents show up and take out the trash, I said, letting her in. They drive you to the pharmacy. They sit with you while you sign your papers and they read the lines out loud so nothing sneaks under. They don't outsource love to strangers with magnets on vans. I'm sorry, she said, and I believed her, which is different from trusting her judgment. We have to learn different lessons at different times, and sometimes we learn them with each other's names on the tests. At 11:38, I backed out with my lights off. I didn't take Sycamore or River. I cut through the laundromat alley where the night clerk smokes with the back door propped by a milk crate and wound behind the bowling alley. In my mirror, a pair of headlights picked up my trail and matched my speed too lovingly. I turned toward Waffle House and slipped down Turner without signaling. The shadow car glided past and kept going. I touched the crucifix that hangs from my rear view because habits keep your hands from shaking. Neptune Skate sits behind a rusting chain link fence, its painted planet peeling into flakes on cinder block like old snow. Beyond it, a row of self-storage units glowed pale and sullen. I parked under the busted light and tucked my phone tight under my bra strap set to record. I sent Clay a voice message he could play in court if he had to. Midnight, Neptune. If I'm quiet for 30 minutes, come like you mean it.
Lila stepped out from Unit 12 like a cat from under a porch. She wore a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, the way she did when she was 5 and helping me ice cookies. Her eyes were ringed with a brown worry you don't earn at 20 unless something has gone very wrong. "Grandma?" she whispered, and I held her harder than my arms expected to have to hold at this age. "Why here?" I asked into her hair. "Because they use it," she said, pulling back and wiping her face with the heel of her hand like she had run out of Kleenex and also patience. "Wellspring. They store boxes here, paper copies of petitions and ledgers and lockbox codes and donation receipts. I've been doing an internship at their office because Professor Daniels said community health looks good on a resume. I thought I was helping people. I thought I was going to hold hands at rehab and remind folks to breathe. God forgive me. I was helping them line people up." She pulled a cheap black thumb drive from her pocket like a talisman. "I took this off Ruthie's desk. It has scans of petitions and templates. The physician affidavits are cut paste with different names. There's emails with Pine and Star about ideal parcels near the new bypass project. And there's an audio file. One file is Porter and Ruthie talking with Deputy Noakes. He says tomorrow's a clean pickup. Judge signed the template, realty staged. Porter says, key under the goose. She told me at the church chili supper. Maple Vista can do the observation." I closed my eyes because I could see my big mouth across the gym at the church supper telling Ruthie, new in town, "It's silly. I still keep the key under a goose like the burglar has him into a yard sale." Some of the worst things in my life have started with me trying to be warm. "Lila," I said, "you are brave and I am mad, and those two things can sit together." Headlights carved the dark. Door slammed. A woman in a wool coat and boots stepped into the fluorescent wash and smiled like Christmas at the children's program. Ruthie Cole was pretty, in the way a knife is pretty when you keep it polished. Beside him, Dean Porter adjusted his scarf like the Cole defended him personally. Behind them, Deputy Noakes rolled his shoulders like a man who doesn't do leg day or remorse. "Mrs. Miller," Porter called, friendly as a throat cold. "You gave us a scare. It's dangerous for you to be out this late. That's exactly why we filed the petition. Let's get you somewhere warm." "It's dangerous to stand between a person and her house," I said, stepping just enough into the light that my voice had a face. "It's dangerous to think the word care is a key that opens any lock at once." Ruthie looked at me the way you look at a dog that might bite or sit. "Let's not make this dramatic. We provide solutions: a room, meals, medication management, friends. Your daughter is exhausted. She needs us to help you. You'll be comfortable at Maple Vista, and we'll handle your assets professionally. This thumb drive and whatever else you think you took, you're going to hand those over now, and we're going to call this a miscommunication. Otherwise, we have an officer here who can escort you." "Escort," I said. Such a tidied up word, like dressing a crow in a bow tie. Noakes took 2 slow steps like he was trying to read my breathing. "Ma'am," he said, hand near his belt, "you're trespassing. This is a secure facility. You need to come with us." I pulled my phone out and tilted it so the tiny red light of recording painted a dot on my knuckles. "You'll be pleased to know," I said, polite as pie, "that we're live to Sheriff Browder's inbox, Pastor Jean's Facebook Messenger, and the women in my Tuesday morning Bible study who can outshare God himself. Deputy Noakes, will you please spell your name for the court?" Ruthie flinched before she fought it. Porter's smile shredded. Noakes' jaw ticked in that exact way that says, "I wish I was smarter or meaner, and I can't decide which would work best." Sirens tore into the night like a seam ripper through a bad hymn. The sound bounced off cinder block and ran down the row of units. Clay's voice came first, calm gone hard. "Hands, now." State jackets appeared, fast and practiced, with Deputy Yates right behind Clay. He kept his gun low, but ready. "Deputy Noakes, you lift your hands and bless the fact you still have options. You so much as twitch, I'll show you how few you have left." Noakes lifted his hands. Ruthie turned her wrists neat as bangles. Porter started talking about misunderstandings and concern and liability. Karen held up a printed email with his name on the header and the words "parcel pipeline" circled in yellow highlighter, like a school project turned criminal evidence. Clay looked at me and I nodded. We're upright. That's what we are. Lila handed Karen the thumb drive, then dug in her pocket for a crumpled sticky note. There's another drive in Ruthie's blue binder with the tab marked donations. The files are labeled by church name, but they're ledgers. Kickbacks, referral fees, lockbox codes, who gets what when the house sells. They call it compassion fees. There's also an audio file of Dr. Meade telling Ruthie he can sign 3 today if she needs to keep the pipeline from backing up. "You little," she started, and then remembered her hands were cuffed and her audience was unimpressed.
"You think this stops with us?" She hissed at me, something cold and honest in her voice for the first time tonight. "You opened something you can't close. There are people up the line who don't spell their names for court reporters." "I believe you," I said. "I also believe in casseroles and sheriffs and granddaughters with thumb drives. We'll see who gets to the finish line smelling like smoke." The aftermath arrived, not with fireworks, but with paper. The probate judge took his glasses off and rubbed his bridge of his nose hard when the AG's office spread files across his bench like a quilt with ugly squares. He vacated the order against me so fast his pen squeaked. He ordered discovery like the word tasted good. Dr. Meade resigned ahead of whatever was coming to him. Pine and Star shuttered their office overnight like they'd been practicing. Some of the names on the bigger checks belonged to people who eat in restaurants without prices on the menu.
Some belong to women who sit in pews and mean it, but like the feel of money more than they want to admit. I don't know which kind of sinner I prefer. Both do similar damage. Marissa came over with 2 coffees and a face that had learned something women don't like to learn in public. "Mom," she said, fingers tight on the cups as if the heat was the only honest thing in the room. "I thought I was buying you rest. I thought guardianship meant relief. He said this is what families who care do when they can't do it all. He showed me brochures of smiling women with perm sets and water aerobics, and I wanted to believe because the alternative is that love is harder than money. I'm sorry." You believed a brochure because you were tired. That's not a crime. It's a caution. Care and control share a first letter for a reason. Don't mix them up again. She nodded and cried into her coffee, and I did not say I told you so, because sometimes mercy is the only way you get to keep the person and the point. Lila sat at my table with her hoodie sleeves pushed back, hands around a mug like the warmth could seep up. "My professor said I had to drop the internship," she said, cheeks splotchy with the kind of shame that doesn't belong to you but sits on your lap anyway. "I didn't know help could look like a sale." "Now you do," I said. "You put the brakes on a machine tonight. Don't forget what it sounded like when it tried to climb over you." Detective Yates came by 2 days later in jeans and a sweater instead of a suit and brought pastries from the good place on Willow Loop where they sugar the tops like they love you personally. She sat at my table with a folder she didn't let out of her hands. "The AG's office is making this big," she said. "Not just here. There's a pattern in 3 counties. The doctor signed affidavits like grocery lists. The deputy greased the wheels. The lawyer wrote the choreography. The guardian smiled. The realtor printed the lockbox codes. Everybody had a job and everybody had a story to tell themselves about why it wasn't so bad. Not everyone will go to prison. Some will plead out. Some will slip. But the pipeline is broken for now." "Good," I said. I like broken when evil is what was working. At the courthouse the next week, Porter wore a navy suit and nothing softer. Ruthie wore a beige sweater like she thought it could dress her heart. Dr. Meade did not show. His lawyer did. Noakes shuffled in cuffs and looked at his shoes. The DA said a lot of words that sounded like music to me. The judge said the right things. The gavel cracked the part of the room where men like to pretend the law is a game. And then, because big days are made of small hours, I went home and made chili and watched a documentary where people rescue baby otters, because you have to rinse your head after what people do to one another. We started something small at the library. Thursday afternoons, we push together 2 tables and I bring egg salad and Pastor Jean brings ham and orange cheese and Detective Yates drops off a stack of highlighters on her way someplace more urgent. We call it sandwiches and signatures, and we read aloud for one another. We look for the line that pays somebody money you never intended to pay them. We look for the words temporary and capacity and secure, and we circle them like ticks. We practice saying no and not today, and I'll get back to you after my daughter reads it. And that's all the magic spell you need most days. When someone says it's just a formality, we say, good, then it can wait. My spare key lives inside now in a little pottery dish by the stove. Clay has a copy in his office because pride and safety are cousins but not twins. The ceramic goose still sits on the porch, but I turned it so it faces the street like a sentinel, not a secret. I planted zinnias in a row so bright it looks like somebody spilled crayons. The mailbox is the same dull black the post office likes, and I did not paint it blue even though I wanted to, because just because you survive a thing doesn't give you the right to irritate the entire zip code for sport. The world gives you plenty of edges to push without choosing the one with a fine. Deputy Noakes took a plea because cowards hate the long road. Ruthie will be counting gray cinder blocks for a while. Porter is learning to pronounce the names of judges he can't charm. Dr. Meade's license now has more conditions than a will on a soap opera and less chance of a happy ending. Pine and Star pulled their sign from my yard for good and left holes like dimpled dimples in the dirt, the kind you notice when you mow the grass just right.
People ask the moral, and I give them the same answer. Not because it's clever, but because it's true. If love feels like a signature under pressure, that's not love. That's a business plan. Don't open the door to a business plan that knocked without an invitation and promises to take care of you if you'll just set down your pen where they point. On the first warm Saturday of March, I stood on my porch with a glass of sweet tea and watched the neighborhood pretend winter hadn't been so bad. A teenager learned to back up a pickup without kissing the mailbox. A woman in pink yoga pants did not pick up after her golden doodle and waved when she saw me anyway, because shame is optional in some zip codes. The train by the river moaned like a contralto with a good memory. I waved back because I refuse to let bitterness have my right hand when it can't even keep my front door.
At church the next day, Pastor Jean preached on the prodigal and didn't pretend the older brother was all wrong. Afterward, at the fellowship table, a woman I don't know well put a hand on my arm. "I heard what you did," she said. "My mama signed something last year and we're still untangling it. I wish I'd had your nerve sooner." I said, "You have your nerve now. Bring your papers Thursday." Lila comes over on Tuesdays with her laptop open and her brow furrowed and her questions so sharp they make me feel 20 again. She'll be a nurse who reads every line and asks where the money's going and why the patient is being moved at night. She knows how things work now, not what commercials say, and that's worth more than a perfect GPA. I feed her chicken salad and make her lie down on the couch for 20 minutes when she starts shaking, because being brave doesn't mean your body is done being scared. Marissa shows up on Saturdays to help with the trash and the hedges and the kind of silence you have to learn how to fill without lying. We talk about small things on purpose. I hand her the big ones slow. She apologizes too often, and I let her for now, because sometimes you have to hear yourself say it 100 times before you can act like you're done being sorry. She asks what I need, and I say, rinse the coffee pot, put the bills in date order, and sit with me while I read the fine print in peace. We're learning care again without the control stitched into the hem. Clay swings by with peach hand pies when his sister bakes too many, and Detective Yates laughs at my porch jokes like she hasn't heard 1,000 worse in 1,000 kitchens where people live through bigger storms than mine. The white Crown Vic is gone from my curb. The only car that sits too long now is the mail truck on days the substitute runs slow and apologizes with a grin. This spring, I put in tomatoes against the fence because I like the way the vines reach for anything that'll hold them. I bought seeds for marigolds because my mother used to say they keep pests away and soothe the eyes. I didn't ask the internet if she was right. I planted them anyway. Beans, my neighbor's beagle with the identity crisis, sleeps on my porch like he pays rent, and I let him. The ceramic goose watches the street like a small general. When the wind hits just right, the porch swing nudges itself forward and back and forward again, and I swear sometimes I can feel my husband push with one toe like he used to when he thought I wasn't looking. I keep the key in the dish and the chain on the door and the phone charged. I read everything that asks for my name at the bottom. I ask who gets paid and why. I remind people that convenience is a luxury you pay for twice. I listen to the train, and I thank God for a granddaughter who knew where to aim her fear, and a sheriff who remembered I was more than a file, and a daughter who learned what care sounds like when it stops selling itself and starts showing up with a rake. I hope I never have to be that brave again, and I know I can be. Sometimes at night, I sit with the porch light off and I watch the square of dark where the realtor sign would have stood, and I let the relief soak in like lotion on chapped hands. They wanted the kind of quiet that comes from being managed. I kept the kind that comes from deciding when to open the door. That's enough for me.